Hi everyone, good morning. I'm Kwai Kwan from FMM. Welcome again to day 2 of FMM Marketing and Branding Webinar 2021, Guide to Growing Your Business with Influencer Marketing. We have 3 speakers today. They are Mr. Mohammad Izwan bin Zakaria, the Managing Partner from Izwan and Partner, Ms. Patricia Tan, the CEO from Nice Celsius, and Mr. Tan Kuan Seng, the CEO from 85 Sendirian Berhad. This is today's program. After the second presentation, there will be a 5-minute break. The question and answer session will be held last after the third presentation. Just like yesterday's session, you may key in your questions using the Q&A function during the speaker's presentations, or raise your hand to ask your question aloud during the question and answer session. Now we shall start day 2 session with the first presentation by Mr. Mohammad Izwan bin Zakaria, the Managing Partner from Izwan and Partner. Mr. Izwan will present on online marketing law, what influencers and marketeers need to know. So over to you now, Mr. Izwan.
Hi, Kwai Kwan. Thank you so much for having me. Would you mind just allowing me to record the session, please?
Yes.
Yeah, can you just give me the permission? Can you allow me the permission, please?
You are the co-host now.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Again, Kwai Kwan, thank you so much for the kind introduction. Very happy to be here this morning. I hope everyone is staying safe. My presentation will take about 40-45 minutes. Again, happy to answer any question that you may have during the Q&A, or if you have any separate question that you want to have, happy to do so as well separately. Again, thank you so much for having me. I do hope that I can do justice to everybody here in giving some key legal issues that we should be looking at. I know the topic earlier seems to point towards the influencers, but Kwai Kwan had kindly clarified that the focus here, many of you are running businesses and companies, or managing businesses, and obviously influencer marketing is becoming one of the most, I would say, effective, or obviously effective is very subjective depending on how you measure it, but one of the more popular ways for companies or businesses to market or sell their products, especially on the internet. So let's jump right into it. My name is Izwan. I am a corporate and technology lawyer. So we run a law firm focusing on advising technology companies and startups. Obviously, the reason why we are here today is because we work a lot with online companies and platforms, and therefore influencer and marketing, digital marketing, some of the things that we come across on a day-to-day basis in the work that we do. So these are some of the companies that we work with. Obviously, we don't want to spend too much time on this. It's just some of the, so we work a lot more with technology companies, but also we recently are working closely as well with small businesses that may be traditional brick and mortar that wants to transition into the digital space. We also help quite a bit with that as well. So why am I here today? I mean, it's very important that I also manage your expectations so that I don't overpromise and underdeliver. It's always better to underpromise and overdeliver, isn't it? So there are 3 things that I hope in the next 40 minutes I will be able to give some ideas in terms of how you can categorize the key legal areas, and more importantly, the 2 parts that I think most pertinent is to help you spot legal issues. I think as a marketing manager or as a business development or whatever role that you may play at the moment in your current company or business, you need to be able to spot legal issues so that you can reach out to your usual legal counsel or any law firm that you usually work with, so that you can get a professional to come and help you, or more whether or not that is something serious that you should pay particular attention to, and obviously why and when you should care about an issue, whether or not that matter requires an additional escalation in terms of legal advice, for example. So, very big topic, very long one. What do you need to do? What do you need to know to ensure that your online marketing efforts are legally compliant? I think try not to make it a boring one, in the sense that now that we understand that a lot of you are also looking at onboarding influencers, perhaps after this session, the next after 2 days, okay, let's put influencer marketing as one of our marketing strategies or campaign, and we want to put a budget, and what are the things that you should look at from a legal standpoint, and we hope that we can cover that as well in the next half an hour or so. So firstly, very important is obviously Kwai Kwan has kindly shared the list of the participants, and many of you come from different industries and selling different products and services. So firstly, very important is to find out if your business is in a regulated space, because the reason why perhaps the first point I want to make is that because if you are in the regulated industries, so these are some of the examples. Obviously, there could be many more companies and businesses out there that are regulated, but these are the most usual ones. So if you are in a financial banking services, obviously, if you're a bank, you know, anyone that has dealt with a bank would know how difficult it is working with a bank, simply because a long list of guidelines and rules that needs to be satisfied, simply because of the fact that they are regulated by the central bank. So similarly with healthcare services and products, pharmaceuticals, if you want to sell supplement product, you know, you need to go through the Ministry of Health, getting the approval from the advertising board. So there are additional restrictions and limitations in terms of what you can market and what you can't market, and especially also for food and consumer products as well. And also another one is quite similar to financial, which is investment and capital market. If you're selling unit trust, insurance product, and all other things are all regulated, and therefore there are certain things that you can say and you can't say, for example. So many more out there depending on what business you're operating. So very important to check at the outset, so that you can have a general idea in terms of what are the things that the influencers can and cannot do, for example, if you were to outsource this campaign. So let me give you a quick example, because I thought this is something that also, again, Kwai Kwan, thank you for giving your feedback. We've tried to put some case studies in terms of the actual life situations that have happened based on cases that have been decided by the court, and also what you can find on the news. I'm sure we all know who this lady is. Needs no introduction, even though you may not have watched the movies or even listened to any of the songs. Very well prominent Malaysian celebrity, Fazura. So very quickly, you can look up the case. You can find a news article on the internet. There's so many coverage about her, and again, happy to share the slides. Kwai Kwan has gotten a copy, so please feel free to just go through it at your own time. But very quickly, what happened was there was a company called Medan Trading. So obviously, they wanted to promote this supplement health product called QTAP. So they went to Fazura and say, hey, why don't you help us with this? And the company actually paid Fazura close to 150,000 with her agent, Universal Music. So both of them already gotten paid 150,000. But what happened was, several months later, after she gotten the money, Fazura went and started her own product called True Dolly, while the contract with Medan company was ongoing. So what happened was, obviously, the company was not happy. The company actually sued Fazura for breach of contract. So when he went to the court found out that the product, this QTAP that this company Medan Trading was asking Fazura to sell, was not was not licensed. It's actually illegal because there's some prohibited ingredient, the things that were not approved by the Ministry of Health, for example. So what happened was the court declared that the court held that decided that the company was not eligible to the money that they already paid. So in other words, Fazura and the agent Universal Music literally got the money as part of nothing. So in addition to that, the court also ordered the company to pay compensation 40,000 ringgit each. So the point I'm trying to make is that, which I'm sure all the members of FMM are not running illegal or unlawful product or services. It's just that the court really emphasized the subject matter. So if the company is not selling a lawful product, the contract itself is not valid. So that is something important that you need to take note. And obviously we'll be covering other aspects as well, exclusivity and other things in the next few slides shortly. So again, I think the second point, I think many of you in the managerial senior role would have already been familiar with personal data protection laws. So nothing related to marketing per se, although very important to ensure that even though you are outsourcing the marketing aspect to an influencer, which is a third party, you need to ensure that all the customers' personal data are used in accordance to what was promised. So for example, you would already have a privacy policy, the data, personal data protection compliance statement. So we won't go through the details here, but essentially what I'm trying to say is that if you're asking your influencer to do certain things that may involve your customer, you need to make sure that the customers or their clients have agreed or consented in writing for their details to be disclosed. So very important point that you should take note here. So as a business, obviously reputation and credibility are a very important component, and you don't want to be in a situation, things move very fast on social media, and this is something that you want to be able to ensure that is going to be safeguarded, because privacy, personal data becoming more important now, especially in the digital economy that we are in right now. So the next one, I won't go to the detail again. Kwai Kwan will share you the slides, but if you're selling things online and e-commerce, these are already enforced. Obviously, whether or not it's being enforced, it's another question, because obviously there's so many people selling things online. But right now there is a list of minimum disclosures in terms of what you need to put in. Not really particularly important if the influencer is going to help sell product and so on, but more towards the marketing side, something for you to know when it comes to consumer protection, particularly on your website. If you are selling anything, you need to disclose the full price, the shipping cost, and the payment method. Again, there's a long list here. Please feel free to go through. I'm sure you have come across it already, but just to give you a reminder in terms of what are the important things to take note, especially the consumer protection aspect. Again, to recap, we don't have a specific marketing law. There's no marketing law act or something like that out there. So what we have is a collection of different legislation, guidelines, and rules that may be pertinent or applicable when it comes to initiating a digital or even offline marketing effort using an influencer or marketer. So that's something that I hope I can cover in the next 14 minutes or so. One thing to know as well is that we have this Malaysian Communication and Multimedia Commission, a very important regulatory body that is looking into contents on the internet. So whatever you publish on social media, in Facebook, Twitter, we do have actually this document called Content Code. Not very easy document to read, but very difficult to implement in the sense that a lot of wordings that are used are not very specific. It uses wordings like, you cannot post something that is indecent, obscene, false. So what is all these obscenes to you may not be obscenes to me, for example. And I'm not looking at this from a morality aspect of it, but more towards really clarity in terms of what is indecent to you. Some people may think that not wearing a shirt is indecent, but some people may not think that way, for example. So as someone that is responsible for your company or your business to come up with a scope for the influencer, you need to be very clear in terms of what are the acceptable conduct, or what are the things that the influencer can and cannot do, and that's why it gets a bit tricky, and hopefully we can cover that component a bit shortly in our discussion in terms of coming up with the do's and the don'ts, if you like, in terms of just like when you are onboarding, when you hire a new employee, the employee will need to sign an employment contract, the offer letter, and on top of that, there's a employee handbook which comes out with all these regulations, like you need to come to work from 9 to 6, and obviously, and in an influencer doesn't work that, but there are certain minimum requirement that needs to be satisfied by the influencer as part of the contract, which we'll cover shortly. So this is where I think maybe the most important component of my discussion today is actually on formal engagement in place. I think many of you who are senior role obviously understand the importance of having a contract in place, especially when you're engaging a third party. So now we won't go through the details as to what is an influencer or key opinion leader or KOL, somebody that helps promote a product or your brand. Anybody that is involved in promoting your brand, your business, your product, service, needs to sign a formal engagement letter. So it sets out the expectation between the parties. But just take note that all these are contractual in nature. So it's not like buying a house where you have a housing development act where all the default liability period, everything is covered under the statute. But in a engagement between a company and an influencer, all the terms of engagement are contractual. In other words, you can really agree on anything and everything so long as they are lawful and so long as they are capable of being performed. Because obviously you cannot sign something that cannot be performed, for example, or something that does not exist. So it needs to be something that is achievable, for example. So what to have in a good engagement letter? These are just some of the pointers. Again, you would probably have your own legal counsel or your own in-house counsel that you usually work with, but these are some of the key points to consider. I think perhaps the most important part is to agree on the duties and responsibility. This is something that I think having a commercial understanding, which is why I think it's good that there are other speakers that will be speaking after me, like Patricia, for example, to share more on the best practices in terms of what are the common scope or commercial expectation. What are the influencer tasks when you hire someone today? Be specific and granular as possible. For example, if you hire an Instagram influencer, be clear. You need to post at least 15 posts by 20 days or 30 days with a clear image or text of your product or service. And you need to get at least 1,500 likes. So if you're clear and you have clarity in terms of your expectation, then then everything, it does not create ambiguity or uncertainty, and that's the point I'm trying to make right now. So if you do not know what is the common number of posts that needs to be made and how long is the duration, then it could be a challenge for you to come up with a good scope of work, and that's something that you need to consider, because obviously it will also affect the budget and also the timeline and what is the expectation. Are you trying to increase more likes on your channel or your Facebook channel or your Instagram, or you're trying to get more conversion in terms of sale? So these are the things that you can actually put in the contract so that everybody is on the same page. But obviously the influencer needs to know whether or not this is something that he or she can do. But obviously sometimes influencer may overpromise or so on. So how do you manage that in the event that the influencer cannot deliver, and what happens? You terminate, do you suspend, or do you reduce the fee? And these are the things that a contract would be able to provide. The next point is the exclusivity clause. Exclusivity is permitted, so you can actually sign an exclusivity clause. So what if suddenly your influencer, if you're running cosmetic, which is the most obvious one, is like if you're already signed here as an influencer for cosmetic A, and the next week cosmetic B comes to the influencer, your influencer, and asks, can you promote my cosmetic B? Then obviously, if you have an exclusivity clause, the influencer will have to say no because I'm already exclusive. I already signed an exclusive talent or influencer agreement with cosmetic A. There's a place that you can take a look. It's called Vanida Imran. You can read more about it. So what happened was, we'll take a look at the case shortly. But what happened was she actually breached her contract when she also promoted a competitor's brand. So exclusivity is obviously permitted under the law, so you can actually incorporate it as part of your contract. Let's look at the next point. The next point is also very important, the duration of the engagement. An influencer is obviously not going to be an employee. You don't pay them their EPF and so. So what it means is that an influencer may only be engaged for a limited period of time. So please be clear on the commencement date, on the start, on the end date, which will also affect the exclusivity period as well. So if you sign a 3 months contract, which means that 3 months time, the influencer cannot go and work for another competitor as an influencer as well. Last, on this slide, it's also intellectual property. We'll be looking at it quite more in detail shortly. Very important because the influencer that you engage could be a singer, could be an actor, could be someone that makes videos, or someone that makes songs, jingle. So what happens if the influencer come up with contents and materials like tagline or jingle or video just to promote your brand or your product? Who will then own this intellectual property or digital asset, for example? Do they belong to the influencer or your company? So be clear in the engagement letter, because a good contract will say that the company, which is you, that engages the influencer, should own the ownership, so that you can continue to use the materials in the next 6 months or 1 year, even after the contract with the influencer may have been terminated. What else to have in a good engagement letter is to be clear in terms of termination. Again, unfortunately, not all contract will last in perpetuity. There would be a time where the contract is terminated, and the most important aspect, perhaps, in every agreement, what are the grounds and situation that agreement can be terminated? If the contract is for 3 months, and can you terminate the contract after 1 month or less than a month? How long is the notice period? Is it for 24 hours, 7 days, 14 days? What happens if the contract is terminated? If you have provided certain materials like your merchandises or some other product, you may want to get these things back. What happens to the unpaid fees? Would you be obliged to pay the remaining amount as a penalty, or would you only need to pay the outstanding amount prorated, for example? Last, also dispute resolution. What if there is a dispute from your contract? The engagement letter should clearly set out the dispute resolution. We won't go to details, but normally the court's procedures would be the best way to do it, as opposed to arbitration, which can actually be more costly and expensive. I know some companies are very reluctant to sign a dispute resolution with a court's procedure, because obviously when you go to the court, everything is out there to the public to see. But at the same time, it may be a good default situation to actually save money rather than going to arbitration for a 5,000 or 10,000 or 50,000 ringgit contract. It may not make sense to go through arbitration, because the fee can actually be a lot more than the actual claim that is being disputed, for example. Other things that you should be looking at, we won't go through the details, but again, you will have a copy of the slides. You can go through it when you're coming out with your own scope. What happens if something happens? The timeline of the deliverable, very important. If before the influencer posts anything, would the influencer need to go through you and your own marketing team, for example? What are the acceptable posting and comments that can be posted? Access to social media accounts. So I do not know, maybe you have your own Instagram or your own Twitter that you want the influencer to access. Maybe, I do not know, maybe something for you to consider. a bit of a licensing component here, which you can include in the engagement letter to use your logo as part of the deal. If there's anything happen, there's a suddenly the contingency plan, there was a PR disaster or anything, something that was a bit edgy, you know, you're going through a bit like a something a bit unusual, like a very unconventional campaign. What if it didn't turn out the way how you wanted it? How do you manage that, for example? Very quickly, this is the Vanida Imran case. You can look it up as well. Exclusivity clause is upheld by the court. So very quickly, what it means is that the court is saying that so long as the product or the service that the influencer is taking up by the competitor is not similar in nature. So for example, if you have an influencer already signed a contract with Nike, the same influencer shouldn't sign a contract with Adidas because Adidas and Nike are doing the same thing, which is in the sports apparel, for example. Another point I want to make before I end the session is do your own due diligence. Take some time to figure out, because obviously there's so many influencers and key opinion leaders out there right now, and we don't know whether some of them actually, obviously many of them have a lot of followers, but we don't know whether the actual followers were purchased or actually organic followers. And obviously this is where the other speakers would be able to help more in terms of helping you to decide which one will be the most appropriate in your campaign that you want to run. Ask for referrals, testimonials. Another thing that I want to highlight also, not so much on the legal side, but is to have a brand guideline. Because if you have a brand guideline, it sets out clear expectation on how the influencer can and use the collaterals, digital assets, so that you know exactly what kind of font, what kind of logo, what's the size, and so on. Also, basically getting very specific as to making sure that you maintain the same consistency of the branding, even though the branding is being done by a third party, which is an influencer, for example. Last part, also don't forget the intellectual property. I've covered it just now. Digital assets like social media channels and pages can even be more valuable than tangible asset. Imagine you have 100,000, 5 million followers on your Facebook or your Instagram, a lot of eyeballs or traffic that you can get. So as a company, you may wish to ensure that the ownership of the contents and materials produced by the influencers will remain with the company even though the agreement is terminated for any reason. So thank you so much for your time. We really love to hear what you're up to. So I hope that gives you some ideas in terms of what you should be looking at. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Izwan. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any question, please continue to type in your question in the Q&A function. I would now like to